What are some of the answers you want by the end of that meeting?
It might make sense to actually draw the target on the barn door.
It's like as if you were walking into a dark closet, but nobody told you what was there.
And they get in the huddle. They got all the players around, and the quarterback's like, do your own thing. I'll try to get the ball to you. Ready? Break.
Break.
It's inconceivable that would happen. Welcome to Building Your Sales Engine. I'm your host, Mark McGraw. Hey friends, Mark here. Welcome back to Building Your Sales Engine. Today I have Mr. John Rosso. If you know, you know. He is a legend in our business, very close friend of mine as well. Great guy. We're going to talk about pre-call planning. We're going to talk a little bit about collaboration on the front end, but a lot of this is really about how do we make sure that we're preparing properly for meetings and some of the consequences if we don't, especially around even having others join the meeting together. If you want the show notes, by all means, jump over to buildingyoursalesengine.com, look for the episode on John Rosso and pre-call planning, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Reach out if we can be of help. Let's jump into the discussion with John. Welcome back, everybody. Mark McGraw here hosting Building Your Sales Engine with my great friend, not just good friend, one of my very, very best, closest friends, and absolute Sandler legend, John Rosso. Welcome to, you're going to be a guest many times. Welcome to your first episode of Building Your Sales Engine, John.
Yeah, super exciting, Mark, and back at you, man. I've learned so much from you, and I appreciate you putting all the hard work into this, and I am excited to be with you.
Indeed. We've had, for those that don't know, we put a partnership together in our businesses along with Jody Williamson's office in Chicago, probably now 2020. And man, what a great experience that's been all the way around. And we're going to dive into pre-call planning in just a minute. But man, has that been a great ride or what?
I think, this is I'm in my 31st year of Sandler, and I would say the last 5 years. And believe me, we've learned a lot every single year, year 1, year 2, year 3. I can make the case that in our collaboration, we've learned more collectively in those 5 years than maybe the other 25 combined. It's been a great collaboration, a great sharing of best practices, and just has made the business even more fun than it has always been.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. So, a big lesson I've pulled away from that is don't be afraid of collaborations. Don't be afraid of working with other people. A lot of people listening are probably, they have to run joint sales calls with people from other products and bringing other people in as they cross-sell and cross-promote products. Don't be afraid of that. Collaborate. You get a lot of good stuff out of it, as we have. And we could do a whole episode just talking about the collaboration and what you get out of that.
Yeah, and it's been nice, Mark, because each of us, Jody, you and I, also get outside help, whether that's Vistage or Strategic Coach or any other number of organizations that we get outside opinions on. But as a peer group, it's great to have sort of that not double-edged sword, but get some outside help from other groups that have other industries and different thinking, and then have a superior peer group and accountability group to really work in as a great 1-2 punch.
It's been a blast. It's been a blast. And not just has been, it is and will continue to be, So, hey, we're going to talk with everybody today about pre-call planning, why it's important, what's a process for pre-call planning. Part of our series here is on building your sales engine, which means what processes do you put into place as you're building out your sales team and you're building out your sales process. So, John, we were thinking a little bit about pre-call plan. Why don't you kick us off? There's so many places we can go with this, but why don't you start with, why is it so important, and what are some of the best practices you've seen in collaborations, even on pre-call plans, or even if you're making a call by yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Even if we, before we even start on the why, to me, I'd be curious to get your opinion on this, Mark. I'm shocked, I tell you, shocked at the number of people who don't do a pre-call plan. I think, and again, when we say pre-call, often what we mean is pre-meeting. This is not before you make a prospecting call. This is, you have a meeting set up, a discovery call, a scope call, a proposal presentation, you name it. I don't know what the number is. My best guess is 20% of the folks are doing some sort of pre-call plan. I don't know, Mark, if you've got any opinions on that.
I would guess that it would be less than 20%, and that would do it at all. And then maybe even the consistency out of 10 meetings, how many out of 10 is there a pre-call plan done at all? So maybe 20% of sellers, and I'm making up the number, we don't
No,
have a
I know.
date on
Yeah.
it. What 1 out of 5 are doing it, and then the 1 out of 5 that does do it, I would be willing to bet that it's not 5 times out of 5.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
as an overall percentage, it's an easy win to take a few minutes and think through, like, what do I need to prepare for this meeting?
It's an easy win, and it's sort of like an analogy I'll use. Like if you were doing a target shooting contest, and you showed up cold and never took time to sort of sight your rifle, for lack of a better word, and
Great
then at
way.
the end said, "I can't believe I missed all those targets." It's crazy. I have one of the folks who worked for me in Pittsburgh a while was an Air Force pilot by the name of Brian. And I would say, Brian, would you ever fly without using your pre flight checklist? He said, Oh, no, of course not. I'm like, Why not? He said, Well, first of all, it's illegal. I would be court martialed or arrested. I said, Wouldn't that be nice if it was illegal for salespeople not to do a pre call plan? I said, Any other reasons? He said, I'm carrying valuable cargo. He was a C 130 kind of pilot. And he said, I'm carrying valuable cargo. And sometimes it's invaluable, meaning it's human life. And if something happened to that cargo or those people I'm carrying, I would completely be held 100% liable for that. And I think about how valuable our time is, how valuable our customers or prospects' time is, and to be able to launch into an hour together, 30 minutes together, you name it, and not be prepared. I'm being over extreme on purpose, is borderline criminal.
Borderline criminal.
So here's an example. I'm always surprised by it's the old listen, if you don't know where you want to go, any road will do. I think that's Alice in Wonderland or something along those lines. Um, but many times when I hit someone cold, hey, I have a sales call with ABC coming up. I'm like, so what do you want to accomplish? And what I find is 60% of the folks have a decent answer. Hey, I want to understand what they're using today, what problems they're having, et cetera.
Those are our
40,
clients, by the way, from a
yeah,
60%.
that's right. Those are the 60% who might know. But when I go one step further, I say, well, let me ask you that. Assuming you accomplish that, you understand who they're using, who else they're looking at, what problems you're trying to solve, they're trying to solve. At the end of that meeting, if you assumed it was successful, what's your actionable next step you're looking for? Almost everybody blanks out.
Yeah.
Uh, it's a good question. Meaning they're thinking about it now as I asked them, but they hadn't thought about it in advance. So again, if you want to increase the odds that you hit your target, you may want to take a little bit of time. And again, on a simple sales call, we can define simple. That might be 5 minutes on a legal pad. On a more complicated 2-hour meeting with a number of executives, with a number of stakeholders, and a number of people from your side of the table, it might take a half an hour, right? It might take 45 minutes, but do the plan.
And to your point, if you want to hit the target, it might make sense to actually draw the target on the barn door, to start. That would be, let's start there.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times when I coach this, I'll say to people, when you're wrapping up the meeting, imagine it's the best meeting possible. You can't
Love it.
wait to call somebody, a spouse, your boss, whoever it might be, and just share with them the good news of what just happened. And it's the best possible conceivable outcome.
Love that.
And then that in turn creates the desired outcome, which really we should talk about this because when we coach this, we coach it as a 4-step framework for a pre-call plan. And I think you coach the same 4 that I
Yeah.
do. We'll find
Yeah.
out, but we'll see. But the first is define the outcome
Yeah.
and know exactly, have it articulated out as specific as humanly possible and as optimistic as humanly possible. That's also realistic. So that's step 1. Fair?
Yeah, and in fact, I love the way you phrased it. Hey, you're calling your spouse, your significant other, someone who you're proud to share. What I say in mine, and I like yours, so I may steal that, Mark, is let's pretend you accomplished everything you wanted to on that meeting, and they turned to you at the end, the customer, the prospect, the client, prospective client, and said, "This was a great meeting. Man, you do this a lot more than I do. You tell me what should be our next steps." Now, they'll never ask you that, but that's how you need to be thinking about optimistically what's that ideal next actionable next step that always includes a commitment from the buyer. I'll give you an example. One of my clients, in fact, I saw him this past Monday. He had a salesperson in the packaging business, and we know a lot about the packaging business. You and I, Mark. He came. He was new to the organization, and his manager John would say, uh, "So what's your next step, Mike?" And Mike would say, "I'm sending them samples." And John would go, "That's not a next step." And he would go, "Of course it's the next step. My next step is I'm sending them samples." And this went on for a while till he said, "Call John and figure this out." So, me, John. So, Mike calls me up and says, "I'm working with John, the manager. He keeps telling me I have a next step." I say, "Well, tell me the situation." "Well, I'm working on this packaging opportunity. Now I've sent them samples." I'm like, "So, what's your next step?" He said, "I'm sending them samples." I'm like, "That's not a next step." He's like, "What's going on here?" Um, and I said, "Now, if you told me that you're sending them samples, you understand the criteria by which they'll be evaluated. You have a date and time in the calendar when you'll review whether or not those samples passed inspections and the decisions that are going to be made once they pass inspections. Now
Yeah.
you have a next step and completely out of the pale. So it can't be one sided. I'm doing a proposal is not a next step. I'm following up in 2 weeks is not a next step."
I love it because I mean, what you just described, John, is like such a difference between what sometimes people think of a next step is and what it really is. I mean, you just did a great example of what of a next step would really be. By the way, I can't help but think of this example that when I was in corporate America, John, if you would have asked me how good of a sales guy I was, and I was VP of sales and had number one of this and that and all these accolades and stuff, if you would ask me, I'd say about a 7. And then I joined the Sandler organization and I started to see people like you, and I realized I was a 7. The scale went to 100.
Right.
And because it's the difference. It's like people think that a 7 out of 10 in the first example you gave was great, but yet you think about the exponential difference of the latter description where we both know what we're going to do, you know what the criteria is, you know what volumes they're going to buy, you know whether or not it met the expectations, you've got to all the above. That's next level.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. I think when I talk to folks and they have no clearly defined, mutually agreed to in the calendar next step, um, my anecdotal evidence is 90% of the time I say, "Did you ask for it, but they wouldn't give it to you, or you never asked?" And 90% of the time, it's like, "No, we were running out of time. I told them I would follow up with them next week." So they're just missing that boat. And if you want to shorten up that sales cycle, time kills deals, even good deals, right? We've got to find a way to have advancement, continuation, clear next steps.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think if you go into a meeting and you have a clearly defined agenda of what you want, well, not even agenda yet, but really an objective of what you want to
Mhm.
accomplish, you're going to end the meeting a little bit sooner such that you can get what you need in and you might present less. And as I say, land the plane a little bit sooner so that you can actually get everything done that you set out to go do because you were intentional about what you wanted to accomplish.
Absolutely. You're responsible for the time management, right? If we say we ran out of time, that's your fault.
That's right.
So, yeah, I would agree.
There are no bad prospects, only bad salespeople.
Right.
Sandler rule. Sandler rule. So that's step one.
Yeah, and so that objective as first step is not only my definition, Mark, you can tell me if this jives with yours, is what do we want to accomplish? That's one. That's a different question than what's the outcome or what's the ideal next actionable step. And I think you can't just tell me what you want to accomplish. I want to find out what problems they have. You then have to move to the end of the meeting and figure out what are the outcomes, what's the commitment or the clear next step that's ideally mutually agreed to and in the calendar needs to be part of that first piece, the outcomes, the objectives.
And there's probably more we could talk about on the objective side, but let's talk about step 2 of the process. And you want to jump there?
Yeah, step two is find a way to verbally convert that outcome and objective into client facing language, right? In Sandler, we'll call it the upfront contract, an upfront agreement. But essentially, this is the way we think about. In fact, one of my favorite analogies, and you'll have to visualize this, is most salespeople look like a frown, right? Like a half circle that's upside down. What I mean by that is, if you look at the beginning of the sales call, they're very weak. If you look at the end of the sales call, they're very weak. And then they do a lot of talking up in the middle, right? So they're an upside down U, right? A semicircle. If we could just turn that circle upside down, if we could turn that frown to a smile, you'd be great at the beginning, talk a lot less in the middle, and be great at the end. And really, the verbal way that you're looking to achieve the objective, setting the expectations on how much time you have, what the agenda is, what are the expectations of the buyer and of you, what are the outcomes you're looking to achieve as defined in your outcome and your objective. It's so step two is really understanding once the preliminary pleasantries. Nice to see you again, Mark. Beautiful weather we're having. When you start the business portion of the meeting, really starting that off in the right direction with regard to how you'll achieve that objective and that outcome using very client facing conversational language.
Yeah, and we call it the upfront contract in the world of Sandler. And if you know, you know. But it is just exactly that, and it's such a great way to start a conversation and get the train on the right tracks right from the very beginning. But to your point, it's client facing language. It's agreeable next steps. If you're Sandler rule, if you're going to fight up front.
Right.
So if you go in thinking you've got an hour and you discover by using that tool that you actually have 20 minutes, well, let's know that at minute 5, not at minute 19.
Right. I don't want to get stuck with, I got to wrap this up in 5 minutes, and I thought I had 25 minutes. But it
Yeah.
happens when I ask folks how many times does that happen, every hand goes up, which is our fault because we didn't get common expectations on those sides. The other thing I found is by verbally uh, agreeing what we're hoping will take place in the meeting, and we're finding that to be mutually satisfiable. Tensions. It's always good to have some tension on a sales call. I don't want no tension, but defenses go down. People sort of
Mm.
it just makes people more comfortable. It's like as if you were walking into a dark closet, but nobody told you what was there, and a mop brushed against you. You're like, oh my gosh. Here, it's like, hey, when you walk in, listen, zero worries. The first thing you're going to hit is jackets. They're going to brush against your face. No big deal. All of that sort of comes on down and reduces the wrong kind of tension, the tension of uncertainty that I don't know where this is going, how long it will last. Are they, in fact, going to hardcore close me at the end of this? All of that tension kind of fades.
And good Sandler sellers will feel that. And as I've said to people, look, if you haven't had the experience in the last 10 days where you felt the presence of them relax on the sales call, that you felt the ease, the tension come out. It's still, there's tension, but that
And you can
breath,
visibly
you
see
haven't.
it. Often you can.
Yeah, you can visibly see it. If you haven't had that experience in the last 10 days, I would say that you're not setting the upfront contract as properly as you could.
Yeah.
So we got on the outset, we got the outcome and what we want to go achieve. We've got step 2 is we got to just internally prepare and practice for what we refer to as the upfront contract. Step 3?
Yeah. Step 3 is questions, and questions comes in a couple of different areas. One is, what questions might you want to ask early to get the conversation headed in the right direction? As an example, I was doing work with a fleet management company years ago who absolutely, we were new in the training. A month or two in, we had taught upfront contracts. They mastered it pretty darn well. And then they would say, so are you happy with who you're using today? And it was such a closed-end question that didn't really gather a lot of information. So while they were good at setting the expectations, they hadn't really thought about what's the best set of questions early on to get the conversation heading in the right direction. And those questions could be about the current situation. They could be, in quotes in the Sandler world, pain indicator type of questions, uncovering gaps between where they are and where they want to be. But there's 3 key parts of thinking about questions. That's one, what are some of the early questions that we want to ask to get the conversation headed in the right direction? Mark, I don't know if you've got additional thoughts on that.
I think that's it. I think a lot of times I think about in the Sandler methodology, we talk about pain, budget, and decision. Those are 3 qualifying criteria. One easy thing, I think anybody walking into a sales call, pretty much wherever they are in the process, they could just default. And again, I don't think they always should, but an easy thing to think about is 3 questions that pertain to what's the issue at hand, what's the budget or commitment or time and all the stuff that go on there, and then lastly, a little bit about how they're going to go about making the decision, timelines, things like that. So those are 3 easy ones. Very often, I know you've had this, I'll role play with someone and go through those questions. And from their industry, they'll look at us and they're like, how do you know to ask that? I'm like, well, I'm just following the Sandler process.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it applies so well. So the third step is all about questions, and part of that is questions that you want to ask them.
Yes.
And then the other half, at least on my side, and I'll throw it out, is the questions that we might get asked by the buyer.
I think take a little bit of time and begin to prepare, right? What are some of the questions you might get asked so that you've given it some thought? I mean, you might be right, you might not be wrong. It's not going to be perfect, but there's a lot of things that are asked consistently. Hey, what makes you different then? Or, who knows? You can prepare pretty well for those questions. I think one other thing I like to add on questions is what are some of the answers you want by the end of that meeting? Because how many times have I debriefed someone and I said, "So, I mean, is this going out to RFP?" Oh, I never asked. Are you the only one? Are you the only one they're speaking to? I don't know. I never asked. Uh, is Mark the one who signs this particular agreement? I don't know. I'm not saying you'll get every answer, but it increases the odds of you getting those answers by detailing out what are some of the things you would want answered by the end. So I see it in three parts. One, what questions do you want to ask early on, right? Two, what questions might they ask that we want to be prepared for? And what would you like to have answered by the end of this meeting? It's a nice sort of three-part to the third element of and I call this a qualitative pre-call plan, Mark, meaning, listen, there are other elements of pre-call plan. Who's going to be there? What do you need to bring? Is there any collateral? I mean, there's all kinds of things you could think about.
Research that I need to do before I walk into the account, how much they've bought from us over the last 3 years, things like that.
That's right. There's all kinds of good stuff. This is simply the qualitative piece of it. So don't pretend it's everything you need to do. But what I find is they do that piece, right? They come in prepared with how much they bought, but they haven't thought about the qualitative piece, which is the difference maker in running on a scale of 1 to 10, a 4 call versus a 9 call.
So step one is objectives. Step two, we're thinking about setting expectations. Step three is what questions are we going to ask? What are we going to answer? Pieces along there, beginning, middle. And then my favorite, and if you're, I swear, I mean, all of it is critical to do, but if there's only one thing you're going to do, to me, it's the fourth one. It's number 4 on the list of things to think through prior to a meeting. And John, that would be,
And that would be your mindset, thinking through what you want to think, feel, or believe walking into that meeting. I would say this is the one that's least done, even though in your opinion it's the most important, it could change. But I think it's the least done, right? People don't take time to center themselves. And I'll give you an example that I see a lot is it's not one of the differentiators between average salespeople and very, very good salespeople is the willingness to ask, in quotes, hard questions
yeah,
in a conversational, inoffensive way. And one of my belief systems that I've written a lot and asked a lot of people to write a lot is it's really hard to make a good prospect bad by asking a reasonable question, right? If you ask a reasonable question, help me understand what's the timeline for this in your ideal world, assuming you've made a decision, it's been implemented, and now you're achieving all the benefits you wanted to achieve. When would that be? If somebody said, well, listen, we're the ones asking questions, that's none of your business. That's a bad prospect. You caught them in the buyer seller dance. You caught them using the buyer system. So what I tell folks is if you really believe you can't lose what you don't have, it's really hard to make a good prospect bad by asking reasonable questions. To me, that increases the gutsiness of,
yeah.
of the salesperson and the willingness to go out of that comfort zone if needed to ask those kinds of questions because we've reframed our thinking from, I must have pissed them off or made them angry to, this is solid information that I am way behind the 8 ball and need to adjust my approach. So those, and we've talked about the standard Sandler one. Sandler had said, act as if you're financially independent and don't need the business. I've sort of edited it to act as if you're financially independent, don't need the business, but absolutely want the business because you know it's right for the client, right for your company, and right for you, and you're not an arrogant SOB. That's
Yes.
a great mindset.
It's a great mindset. Be curious, skeptical, and
Love
attached to
that.
the outcome.
That's right.
That's a good one too. There's so many. We have a list of maybe 70 different mindsets, and there's the list is probably 7 million. But I think sometimes people need a little bit, like the help that you gave them. They need a little bit of examples of what kinds of things. Like I've had people say, "Look, I'm going to go into a negotiation. My mindset is we're worth every frickin' penny." And I have pound your fist on the table when you say it. We're worth every frickin' penny, and that mindset starts to build up inside of you, so that you have the conviction and you can withstand some of the slings and arrows that come your way when they try to beat you up on price. And just as that's an example of many different things.
No, love the example because in many cases, you've got I'm making up these numbers, you've got a $120,000 solution to a $6 million problem.
Yeah,
You're worth every
you're worth every
penny,
penny.
you know? I mean,
You
you're
know,
getting X whatever X return on investment is, but it's a
and,
big one.
and yet people will still cave sometimes and squander margin right there if they're not following a process, if they're not going through this, and if they're not building themselves up. So it's to me, it's again why, in my mind, and I think everybody could pick. You could make an argument for every one of those four steps of being the most important.
Yeah.
To me, that one's just the most important. Here's another little piece in this as well, John, and that is a lot of the folks that we coach and train are making joint sales calls, and they
Mhm,
have more than one people.
mhm.
They have a partner, a distributor. They have uh, someone technical coming in with them on the sales call.
Sure.
They're bringing their manager, whatever it is. Man, I can think of nothing better as far as making sure that no one's stepping on each other's toes than at the very least going through those four steps. And there are more than just that to make a good practical joint sales call. But those four steps are critical, especially when you're doing a call with anybody else.
Yeah, and yes, absolutely. David Sandler, again, no longer alive, of course, would call it like you have your coffee shop meeting where you're going to do some of this pre-call planning, but really, on a sales call, one person needs to be the conductor. So I ran a joint sales call this morning with Stephen from my organization, who and we had our pre-call plan. I'm like, Stephen, you are the captain of this call. My role is, and my role was a negotiation role. I said, my role is X, but you're going to open up the call and you're going to end the call because the person who's the captain or the conductor does control the flow of that meeting, like bringing in the resources when they need it, you know,
Yeah.
being there to listen and clarify some things that are happening. So you have to understand your roles. You also have to understand, like if you're going in with a technical resource, the joke that's been around for a long time that I think is true in my early IBM career is you'd bring someone technical in. They were asked kind of a commercial question. They start to answer. You kick them, and they say
Yeah.
out loud, "Who's kicking me?" Right? Yeah, who's kicking me? So oftentimes when you're bringing a technical resource in, um, you'll have to you'll have to train them or have a conversation about when the conversation turns commercial. You can give them some transition language like, Mark, you probably ought to take this question because you've done a lot more of this than I have, and now I'm turning it over to the person who's got skills, if you will, because maybe it needs to be reversed, meaning we need clarification or to ask a question
It's
about
the
it.
appropriate person to answer
It's
the
the
question.
appropriate person to answer. And if you're bringing a manager in, again, back in my IBM days, the biggest fear was, uh, I'm from corporate and I'm here to help.
Yeah.
Uh-oh, right? So you've got to, and often not our sales managers that we train, Mark, of course, but the sales manager, the leader, the CEO wants to be a hero sometimes, and they can't keep quiet. And we need to very specifically give them that role in that call. And again, understand how to pass that baton back.
Yeah, and it's that coordination is what it is. I mean, I always get the middle image of a quarterback in the NFL, and they get in the huddle, and they're they got all the players around, and the quarterback's like, "All right, do your own thing. I'll try to get the ball to you. Ready? Break."
Break.
I mean, it's inconceivable that that would happen in a professional setting, and yet we're in professional settings all day long, and a lot of times some of those plays and some of that pre-call planning, even before a play or before a sales call, just doesn't happen. And there's so much squandered business that comes out of that from people that don't follow these steps and don't have this in their sales playbook.
And it's so preventable if you simply did pre-call planning. And Mark, I think one of the things I wanted to reinforce that you said earlier, on all of these elements, people need help, right? Again, if I simply said, do an objective, right? Set good agendas, think about questions, think about mindsets. They struggle. Like on mindsets, you got to help them the way you did, give them examples, right?
Yeah.
And on setting agendas, give them examples. Our upfront contract on what good objectives and good clear next steps are, because people do think sending samples with no next step was a next step. The kinds of questions people want to ask, it's worthwhile if you've got a peer, a mentor, a coach, a trainer, you, me, someone sort of guiding them early on to understand what's effective within those 4 pieces.
And too, you get emotionally involved in the sale. There's a lovely expression: you can't read the label from inside the jar.
Right.
And if you're running the meetings and you're preparing for the meeting, a lot of times there's things that you miss that somebody on the outside would see.
Yeah.
So as always, John, we will definitely do this again. Pick some other topics as well. Loved having you on the show, and thank you for being here. And thank you. I'm going to say this to you. And for everybody, John always inspires me to be a better person.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said that to you over the years that I've known you, and you just set a shining example of how to be a good human being. And anybody that knows you knows that. Yeah. And
well, super gracious, Mark. So I certainly appreciate everything you've done for me professionally. But as you said earlier, what I appreciate more and love the most is how good of friends we've become, and you as a person as well, and the way you've been able to help our teammates. Right, the people on in my company constantly reference Markisms, for lack of a better word, and how much it's helped them in their lives. But that's part of the full circle of what we talked about on collaboration. So I appreciate you having me here. I'd love if you have me back again sometime.
We'll do it again. Thanks. We'll do it again. Thanks, John. Appreciate it so much. So, hey, I hope you've gotten a ton of value out of this episode. By far, it's our purpose to help people make money and have fun and have a good time. We're here to help improve your life, to help you make it easier to go sell or to manage your sales team, and ultimately to go build your own sales engine. Don't miss an episode. Best way to go do that is to make sure that you jump out to buildingyoursalesengine.com/follow, where you can link up to all of our latest episodes. For more information about this episode, go to buildingyoursalesengine.com, where you can download show notes, transcripts, and other information, including handouts, snapshots of this and other episodes. If you'd like to connect with us to talk about how we can help you build your sales engine, and you are either located in the state of Georgia or are referred to us by one of our clients or affiliated by one of our clients, please reach out to us at buildingyoursalesengine.com, where you can click there to book some time with us. We can find out how we can be of help with one another. If you're not in either of those two circumstances, please reach out to Sandler.com, where you can find a Sandler office near you. Be well.